Late Thursday, President Donald Trump ordered cruise missile strikes against the Syrian military base responsible for launching a chemical attack on civilians, killing around 75 Syrian men, women, and children.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
According to Pentagon officials, at around 8:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 59 Tomahawk missiles were fired onto the western Syrian Shayrat airfield, which is located in Homs.
More than 20 million Americans from South Carolina to New Jersey are in the path of severe weather today. On Wednesday, tornadoes were reported from Georgia to Indiana. The tops of the homes started peeling off, so we knew it was a really serious storm, Georgia resident Calvin Friedman said. It could be much worse, and I'm very thankful that it's not, said Friedman. While there had thankfully been no deaths, only 2 injuries had been reported. Nevertheless, there were over 1,000 cancellations at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport Wednesday, with passengers and the airlines waiting out the bad weather.
A Chinese fighter plane has been spotted on a Chinese-held island in the South China Sea. The first such deployment seen this year, a US think tank reported on Thursday. The Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, or AMTI, part of Washington Center for Strategic and International Studies, said the J-11 fighter was visible in a satellite image taken on March 29th of Woody Island in the Paracel Island chain. News of the deployment came as US President Donald Trump was due to hold his first meetings with China's President Xi Jinping in Florida on Thursday and Friday, at which he is expected to air US concerns about China's pursuit of territory and militarization of outposts in the South China Sea. The United States has said in the past that deployments of Chinese fighter jets to Woody Island were part of a disturbing trend of militarization that raised questions about Beijing's intentions in the South China Sea, which is an important trade route.
A Texas bill for male masturbation is one step closer to getting underway. The bill would establish a $100 fine. Dubbed the Men's Right to Know Act, the Houston Chronicle reports House Bill 4620 will be taken up by the State Affairs Committee in the Texas House of Representatives in order to mock restrictions on women's access to abortion and other health procedures. Democratic State Representative Jessica Farrar of Houston introduced the legislation in March. The bill would create a civil penalty for unregulated masturbatory emissions that occur outside of a woman's vagina or medical facility. The stated purpose is regulating men's health and safety.
2 Florida men have pleaded guilty to conspiring to support ISIS. The U.S. Justice Department says 32-year-old Dane Antoni Christian and 51-year-old Darren Arnest Jackson face a maximum of 20 years behind bars. Christian also faces another 10 years for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Their guilty pleas were announced April 4th, but the men have been jailed since their arrest during an FBI raid last summer. Authorities say they were driving a 3rd suspect to the Miami airport, where he was to catch a flight to Germany, then travel to Syria, where he would join ISIS. Authorities say the trio had been conspiring with an FBI informant for about a year. They note Christian and Jackson, quote, also expressed a desire to travel to Syria to join ISIS. The 3rd suspect, 53-year-old Gregory Hubbard, is scheduled to go on trial this fall. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
Killer whales may now be facing a new threat from humans, infectious diseases. According to a study published March 24th in Scientific Reports, researchers found salmonella and staph bacteria spurting from killer whales' blowholes as they exhaled. The discovery of these pathogens, which cause disease in humans, is raising concerns about how the whales were exposed to them in the first place. Furthermore, some microbes were antibiotic resistant. This could indicate they came from human activity and ended up in the ocean through waste seepage or storm runoff. In a statement, the lead author of the study, Stephen Raverty, said, quote, in some circumstances, these pathogenic microbes could pose a threat to the animals and contribute to clinical disease. The study followed southern resident killer whales, which live off the coast of British Columbia. Census data reveals the population has fallen in the past 2 decades to less than 80. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Neela Uni.
A coalition of 17 U.S. states filed a legal challenge on Wednesday against efforts by President Donald Trump's administration to roll back climate change regulations. The law is clear. The EPA must limit carbon pollution from power plants, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman said in a statement announcing the challenge. The order's main target was Obama's Clean Power Plan, a law that would require states to slash carbon dioxide emissions from power plants, but which was never implemented because it was challenged in court by 26 Republican-led states.
It's been reported by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention that there have been 43,485 laboratory-confirmed cases of the Zika virus in all 50 U.S. states. 2 species of invasive mosquitoes have entered the states and are traveling past states in warmer climates. In Florida, there are 1,114 cases of Zika. In California, there are 529. And in New York, there are 1,016. It has also been documented that 363 people with the Zika virus have donated blood. The Zika virus first entered the U.S. in Houston, Texas in March of 2016.
Alison Bechdel, Vermont's new cartoonist laureate, has made a career out of illustrating the complexities of same-sex relationships. It just took a while for the world to change enough to accept her work. Bechdel was awarded the title of cartoonist laureate on Thursday at Vermont's State House in Montpelier. After meeting Republican Governor Phil Scott, she said that when she began cartooning about same-sex relationships decades ago, it was the most subculture, fringe, beyond-the-pale thing you could ever think of doing. Her memoir and graphic novel, Fun Home, was transformed into a Tony Award-winning musical. In 2014, she was awarded a MacArthur Genius Grant, which honors people who show exceptional creativity. She says as a cartoonist laureate, she'll call attention to cartooning as an art form.
A U.S. appeals court ruled that the 1964 Civil Rights Act protects lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender employees from discrimination in the workplace. The 8-3 decision on April 4th by the full U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit found that the 1964 law barring sex discrimination extends to sexual orientation. The case involved Indiana teacher named Kimberly Hively, who filed a lawsuit alleging that she wasn't hired full-time by Ivy Tech Community College because she's a lesbian. It's a landmark ruling, the first such ruling from a federal appellate court that likely sets up a battle before the Supreme Court. The 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruling came just 3 weeks after a 3-judge panel in Atlanta had an opposite ruling, saying employers aren't prohibited from discriminating against employees based on sexual orientation. For Newsbeat Social from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
A Filipino man had his legs amputated after being infected by a flesh-eating disease. Terry Paella was visiting relatives in Victoria, Australia when he became ill during March 2017. Paella's family believes he was bitten by a white-tailed spider, and his daughter noted to the BBC he has been diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis. Necrotizing fasciitis is a flesh-eating disease caused by strep, a bacteria, and could be fatal if it reaches vital organs. However, there is some dispute if Paella's condition was caused by a spider bite. Clinical toxicologist Dr. Jeff Isbister wrote a 2004 study on spiders being mistakenly linked to human diseases. Isbister found no link between necrotizing fasciitis and spider bites. Currently, Paella is in serious condition at the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne, and if the infection spreads, he could lose his arms. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
Another series of severe storms rolled through the Carolinas early Thursday, a day after severe weather produced snow, hail, and heavy rains across the country. This is the remnants of the system that threatened the entire southeast on Wednesday. A severe thunderstorm watch remained in effect for many counties in central South Carolina, and high wind warnings were in effect in the North Carolina mountain region. A special marine warning was issued for the majority of the South Carolina coast, warning residents about the dangers of potential waterspouts.
Massive flooding has hit New Zealand's North Island. Whakatane Mayor Tony Bond told Radio New Zealand on Thursday, April 6, it is a, quote, once-in-a-500-year event. The flooding was caused by rain from Cyclone Debbie, which hit Australia a week ago. Up to 250 millimeters of rain fell over a 36-hour period in New Zealand's Bay of Plenty area. Bond told Radio New Zealand he has, quote, grave concerns for the town of Edgecombe, which appears to be the worst hit. About 2,000 people were evacuated in Edgecombe Thursday morning after the Rangataki River burst its banks, causing waters to rise as high as 2 meters in the town. No deaths have been reported, although police are searching for a man who is believed to have gone missing. The New Zealand Defence Force and the Red Cross are assisting in relief efforts. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Mila Uni.
An Hamas military commander is being hit by the United States with terrorism sanctions. According to the State Department, Abu Anas al-Gandour is being designated as a global terrorist. The designation freezes any assets in the United States. It bars Americans from doing business with him. Hamas is the Islamic militant group that rules the Gaza Strip. According to the U.S., Hamas is a terrorist organization. Gandour leads a Hamas brigade in northern Gaza. He spent 5 years in Israeli prison decades ago. The U.S. says he was involved in an attack on an Israeli military outpost on the Israel-Gaza border that killed 2 Israeli soldiers.
An atmosphere is necessary to keep life from receiving a lethal dose of radiation from the sun. For the first time, astronomers have spotted just such a life-preserving bubble on a planet close in size to Earth. GJ1132b is about 1.4 times as wide as our planet and has about 1.6 times the mass. It also appears it could have a steamy atmosphere rich in water, oxygen, and methane. This sounds like a good thing, but anyone visiting GJ1132b can expect temperatures around 450 degrees Fahrenheit. This is still good news because GJ1132b orbits an M-dwarf star, one of the most common types of stars. Usually these stars shoot particles that destroy atmospheres, but with this discovery, there is a whole universe of potentially habitable planets waiting to be found.
Hillary Clinton is saying misogyny certainly played a role in her election defeat to Donald Trump last November. She then went on to claim that people felt uncomfortable with her being a successful woman, claiming that there is an inverse relationship between success and popularity that only applies to women. It's not the first time that Clinton has blamed her unpopularity on supposed sexism. During the Democratic Party primaries in April last year, Clinton reportedly justified her low favorability ratings as a result of sexism within the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, last September, Barack Obama blamed Clinton's low poll numbers on the notion that society is still grappling with what it means to see powerful women.
Jehovah's Witnesses may be declared an extremist organization in Russia. Russia's Supreme Court began court hearings Wednesday, April 5th, regarding the Justice Ministry's request to ban the religious group and declare it extremist. The Justice Ministry made the request last month, saying the religious group's pamphlets caused conflict among other groups, according to the BBC. Lawyers for the Jehovah's Witnesses filed a counterclaim and said the Justice Ministry suit was political repression and illegal. The courts wouldn't review the counterclaim, according to the Russian Legal Information Society, because that is another organization's responsibility. But the court didn't say what organization that is. The BBC says the case was adjourned until Thursday. There are an estimated 175,000 Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia. The religious group was banned in the 1930s under Joseph Stalin's rule, but was again allowed to practice in 1991. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Kimberly Caldwell. You might start seeing more men holding hands in public, and there's a good chance they're straight. It's part of a social media movement protesting homophobia, following an attack on a gay couple April 2nd in the Netherlands. Police in the city of Arnhem said a group of teenage boys attacked a 31-year-old man and his 35-year-old partner as they were returning home from a party. The assailants reportedly wielded a pair of bolt cutters. One of the victims lost some teeth. In a tweet following the incident, Dutch magazine founder Barbara Barend said, quote, "Can this whole week, all men, straight and gay, please just walk hand in hand?" A hashtag supporting the victims also started trending on social media. In response, men from all walks of life, including politicians, policemen, actors, and ordinary citizens, are walking hand in hand in solidarity. Activists urged the Netherlands to work harder to combat violence against the LGBTQ community. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Kimberly Caldwell.
The U.S. state of North Dakota is mulling legislation that would permit lawmakers and other elected officials to carry hidden firearms into publicly owned or operated buildings. This includes government institutions like the state capitol and even schools. The bill easily passed the House of Representatives April 4th with a vote of 86-5. It will now head to the Senate. The legislation does come with stipulations. Lawmakers and officials would need a concealed weapons permit and have to maintain the same level of gun training as law enforcement officers. The bill would add elected officials to a list of people who are already allowed to carry concealed handguns at public gatherings, including Attorney General staff members, municipal and district court judges, and retired law enforcement officers. The measure follows separate legislation passed in North Dakota last month, which allows people to carry concealed handguns without a permit. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Neela Uni. North Korea launched yet another ballistic missile flying about 60 kilometers into the Sea of Japan. The launch on April 5th comes just one day before Chinese President Xi Jinping meets with U.S. President Donald Trump in Florida. The two leaders are expected to discuss North Korea's increasingly active weapons program. There are concerns North Korea, which frequently threatens the United States, could eventually develop weapons capable of hitting the U.S. mainland. China is a close trading partner of North Korea, but the government has repeatedly said it opposes North Korea's ballistic missile tests. Trump has criticized China for not using its economic influence over North Korea to choke off its weapons program. Trump told the Financial Times on Sunday, quote, "If China is not going to solve North Korea, we will." U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said in March, quote, "All options are on the table." For Newsbeat Social, I'm Neela Uni.
Russian submarine patrols have reportedly reached a level of operation not seen since the Cold War. According to the head of the Russian Navy, Admiral Vladimir Korolov, the Russian submarine fleet last year spent more than 3,000 days at sea, a level unseen since before the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, the Soviet Navy had the largest submarine fleet in the world, with more than 270 submarines. However, the country's Navy suffered after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when a lack of money caused many ships to be scrapped or abandoned. It has grown stronger in recent years through an arms modernization program. Korolov made the comments on March 31st during the commissioning of the country's newest nuclear-powered attack submarine, the Kazan. The admiral lauded the launch of the multi-role submarine, saying that it, quote, represents the cutting edge of nuclear submarine design. For Newsbeat Social from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Severe storms are raking the southeast, unleashing one large tornado and more than a half dozen apparent twisters on Wednesday. The natural disasters have toppled trees and downed power lines in rural Georgia. Similar scenes played out in spots around Alabama and South Carolina amid drenching rain, high winds, and scattered hail. The severe weather outbreak was the second to hit the South in less than a week. No deaths or significant injuries have been reported so far. Portions of Kentucky and Georgia were still under threat of tornadoes late Wednesday. Flash flooding was possible in the Atlanta area.
The United States is cutting off funding for the United Nations Population Fund, or UNFPA, an agency which focuses on family planning and reproductive health. The U.S. State Department announced Monday, April 3rd, that it will no longer provide financial backing, saying the agency, quote, supports or participates in the management of a program of coercive abortion or involuntary sterilization. In a statement released Tuesday, the United Nations refuted the claim, saying it was erroneous. The statement went on to say that funding the UNFPA has received from the U.S. has, quote, saved tens of thousands of mothers from preventable deaths and disabilities. The agency works in more than 150 countries worldwide. The cut means a loss of more than $32 million for the 2017 fiscal year alone. It follows President Donald Trump's decision earlier this year to withdraw U.S. financial support to international organizations that offer abortion services or information. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Neela Uni. The domestic trade in rhino horns is effectively legal in South Africa after the country's top court dismissed an appeal brought by the government to uphold an 8-year ban. South Africa's Constitutional Court rejected an application filed by the Department of Environmental Affairs April 5th, which was the government's final attempt to appeal. The buying and selling of rhino horns is still restricted and permits are required. Rhino breeders argue that legalizing the trade allows them to saturate the market with existing stockpiles and drive down poaching. In a statement, the private rhino Rhino Owners Association called the judgment a victory that benefits rhino conservation. However, many wildlife groups say the domestic trade will only fuel demand from Asia and violates an international ban. In a tweet, the International Rhino Foundation called the court's decision, quote, irresponsible. South Africa has the world's largest rhino population with around 30,000. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Neela Uni.